Captain Lee Hyun rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the flickering screen in front of him. The message had been playing on repeat for 3 days now, and each time it got a little quieter, a little more desperate. The alien voices speaking, in clicks and whistles, had been translated by their computers. But you didn't need a translator to hear the fear. The Cathera were dying. Their water world, a beautiful blue planet called Aquanus Prime, was being eaten alive by something they called the Void Hunger. From what Haon could understand, it was like a disease that fed on life itself, spreading through their oceans and killing everything it touched. The aliens had sent out distress calls to every corner of the galaxy, begging for help from anyone. Who would listen? The problem was nobody wanted to listen. Hyun scrolled through the response files on his computer. The Zentari Coalition, one of the most powerful groups in the galaxy, had basically said it wasn't their problem. The Vorthan Empire, known for their massive warships and advanced technology, claimed there was nothing valuable enough on the planet to risk their soldiers. Even the Galactic Aid Consortium, who supposedly helped planets in trouble, had put the request in their maybe-later pile. It made Haon sick to his stomach. Here was an entire species facing extinction, and the galaxy's response was to look the other way and pretend it wasn't happening. The monitoring station was quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of the message still playing. 23 humans worked here, far from Earth, listening to the galaxy's conversations and keeping track of what was happening in space. They were like the neighborhood watch, except their neighborhood was billions of light years wide. Park Jin, a young communications officer with quick fingers and sharp ears, suddenly looked up from his console. His face was pale, and Haon could see the worry in his eyes. "Sir, we're getting another transmission from the Cathera, Park said, his voice barely above a whisper. But this one is different. They're not asking for help anymore." Haon walked over to Park's station and listened to the new message. The translation software worked overtime, turning the alien sounds into words he could understand. What he heard made his heart sink. The Cathara weren't sending distress calls anymore. They were praying. Their message was full of sadness and acceptance, talking about how they would face their end with dignity. They thanked the universe for the time they had been given and asked that someone, somewhere, would remember their species existed. They had given up hope that anyone would come to save them. Around the station, the other crew members had stopped their work to listen. Engineer Kim Minesio wiped tears from her eyes. Technician Odeho clenched his fists in anger. Navigation specialist Yoon Gi-woo shook her head in disbelief. These weren't just alien voices on a radio anymore. They were people, just like humans. Facing death and abandonment, Hyun felt something burning in his chest, a feeling he recognized from his time in Earth's military. It was the same feeling he got when he saw bullies picking on someone smaller, or when he heard about injustice happening somewhere in the world. It was the feeling that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Humans couldn't walk away from someone in trouble. The galaxy called them Deathworlders, because Earth was a dangerous planet that had created dangerous people. Other species feared humans because they came from a world of storms, earthquakes, predators, and disasters. They thought humans were violent and unpredictable, but what the galaxy didn't understand was that growing up on a dangerous world had taught humans something important. It taught them that life was precious and that sometimes you had to fight to protect it. Even when the odds were against you, especially when the odds were against you. Hyun looked around at his crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. Earth didn't have the fastest ships or the strongest weapons. It didn't have advanced technology or vast armies. What they had was something the galaxy had apparently forgotten how to feel. They had compassion. "Send a message to Earth Command," Hyun said, his voice steady and sure. "Tell them we have a situation out here. Tell them there's a species that needs help, and everyone else has turned their backs on them." He paused, thinking about how Earth's Command would react to what he was about to suggest. They would probably think he was crazy. They would definitely think it was dangerous. "And tell them," he continued with a slight smile, "that the Deathworlders are about to do something stupid again." Admiral Kim Soo-jin walked into the emergency meeting room in Geneva, her boots clicking against the polished floor. The room was packed with Earth's top military commanders, scientists, and government officials. Everyone knew why they were there. Nobody wanted to be the first to say how crazy this mission sounded. The holographic display in the center of the room painted a grim picture. Quantus Prime was so far away that even their fastest ships would take 14 months to get there. That was assuming everything went perfectly, which it never did. The journey would eat up fuel, supplies, to manpower that Earth could barely spare. And then there were the survival odds. Intelligence Director Choi Minho stood up, adjusting his glasses nervously. He had been crunching numbers all night, and none of them looked good. Admiral, I have to report that the galaxy is already treating this like entertainment. Word has gotten out about our plans, and alien betting pools are taking wagers on how long we'll survive. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he had to say next. The current odds are 8-1 against us making it back alive. Some species are betting we won't even make it to the planet. Instead of looking worried, Admiral Kim smiled coldly. There was something in her expression that reminded everyone why humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders. Perfect, she said. Let them think we're walking into a suicide mission. Let them underestimate what humans can do when we put our minds to it. She turned to Captain Yoon Haewon, a tough woman who had spent years commanding deep space missions. Captain, tell me about our volunteers. How many people are crazy enough to sign up for this? Yoon looked down at her tablet, and her eyebrows raised slightly. Even she seemed surprised by the numbers. 17,000 applications, Admiral. For only 300 spots on the mission, the room fell silent. 17,000 people, willing to risk their lives for aliens they had never met. On a world they had never seen, fighting an enemy they didn't understand. What kind of people are applying? Kim asked. The kind you'd expect, Yoon replied with a slight grin. Deep-sea researchers who spend months in underwater stations, miners who work inside active volcanoes, construction workers who build space stations in zero gravity, people who are used to working in places that would kill most folks in minutes. Other words, added Commander Park Woo-bin from the back of the room. The kind of people who think impossible conditions are just another day at the office. Dr. Lee So-young, Earth's top expert on alien biology, stepped forward. She had been studying the Cathara transmissions nonstop since they first received the distress call. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had been working around the clock, but her eyes were sharp with determination. Admiral, I need to be honest about what we're facing, she said. The Cathara aren't anything like us. They're completely aquatic, living their entire lives underwater, but it's not water like we know it. They breathe liquid methane at temperatures that would freeze our blood solid. She pulled up images of the alien planet on the holographic display. It looked beautiful, but completely hostile to human life. Their world has crushing pressure, toxic atmosphere, and now it's infected with something that eats life itself. We'll be operating in an environment where a single suit breach means instant death. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed what she was saying. They weren't just going to a dangerous planet. They were going to an alien world that was actively trying to kill everything on it. Commander Park broke the silence with a dry chuckle. Sounds like Tuesday, he muttered, earning nervous laughter from around the room. But his joke made an important point. Humans lived on a planet that had been trying to kill them since the day they evolved. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, ice ages, predators, diseases, poisonous plants, and deadly animals. Every day on. Earth was a survival challenge that most alien species couldn't handle. Maybe. That's exactly what made them qualified for this mission. Admiral Kim looked around the room, seeing the determination in everyone's faces. These weren't politicians or bureaucrats making calculated decisions about acceptable losses. These were people who understood that sometimes you had to risk everything to do what was right. Prep the fleet, she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of command. Get our volunteers ready, load every ship we can spare, and plot a course for Quantus Prime. She paused, thinking about the 17,000 people willing to risk their lives for strangers, and the aliens who had given up hope of rescue. If we're going to be the galaxy's conscience, she said grimly, then we better do it right. 3 months into their journey through the dark emptiness of space, the human fleet found itself facing one of the galaxy's most feared regions. The Maelstrom Nebula stretched out before them like a wall of swirling chaos, filled with colors that shouldn't exist, an energy that could tear apart any ship unlucky enough to get caught in its grip. Most civilized species took the long way around this place, adding months or even years to their travel time rather than risk flying through it. But humans didn't have months or years to spare. The Kithara were dying, and every day they delayed meant more lives lost. Chief Engineer Bae Sungmin stood in the engine room of the UCS Determination, watching his instruments like a hawk. The ship shook and groaned around him as invisible forces tried to pull it apart. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the air smelled of burning metal and ozone. Hull stress at 92%, called out Engineer Oh the Jin from her station. Sweat dripped down her face as she worked to keep their experimental engines from exploding. The exotic matter drives are running way hotter than they're supposed to, but somehow they're still holding together. The exotic matter drives were humanity's latest attempt at faster-than-light travel, cobbled together from stolen alien technology and human stubbornness. They were unreliable, dangerous, and had a habit of breaking down at the worst possible moments. But they were also the only thing that could get them to Aquinas Prime in time to matter. On the bridge, Captain Yoon Hae-won stood with her feet planted wide, riding out the turbulence like a sailor in a storm. Through the view screen, she could see stars stretching and bending into impossible shapes as the nebula's gravitational fields played havoc with space and time. The colors were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, shifting from deep purple to electric blue to a green that hurt to look at. Around them, the rest of the human fleet struggled to maintain formation. 7 ships in total, each one packed with volunteers who had left behind families and careers to help complete strangers. Some of the ships were military vessels built for combat and exploration. Others were converted cargo haulers and research. Ships never designed for this kind of punishment. But they all kept flying because that's what humans did, kept going when any sane species would have turned back. Down in the linguistics lab, Dr. Lee So-young was surrounded by holographic displays showing alien anatomy and language patterns. She had been working non-stop since they left Earth, trying to understand everything she could about the Kithara and the thing that was killing them. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, and her eyes were red from staring at screens for too long. Finally starting to understand their biochemistry, she announced over the ship's communication system, her voice tired but excited. This parasite they're talking about, this void hunger, it's worse than we thought. It's not just eating them alive. It's actually rewriting their DNA, turning them into something else. Captain Yoon felt a chill run down her spine. How long do they have left? She asked. Dr. Lee looked at her latest analysis, comparing the current Kithara transmissions to the ones they had received months ago. The difference was heartbreaking. Where once there had been thousands of voices calling for help, now there were only hundreds. The signals were weaker, more desperate, filled with the kind of hopelessness that came from watching your entire species slowly disappear. Based on how much their transmissions have degraded since we left Earth, she said quietly, I'd say maybe 6 weeks after we arrive. It's maybe less if this thing speeds up. The bridge fell silent except for the sounds of the ship struggling against the nebula's forces. 6 weeks wasn't much time to figure out how to fight something that the galaxy's greatest scientists couldn't understand. Navigation Officer Han Ji-woo looked up from his console, his expression a mix of amusement and disgust. Captain, we're picking up a broadcast from the Galactic News Network. Apparently our mission has become entertainment for the rest of the galaxy. He put the alien broadcast on the main screen, showing news anchors from different species discussing the human fleet's progress. The translation software turned their various languages into something the crew could understand, but the tone was universal. They were talking about humans like they were watching gladiators heading into an arena. They're calling our mission the Death March of the Deathworld Fools, Han continued. Some of the commentators are actually taking bets on which ship will blow up first. Captain Yoon listened to a few more seconds of the broadcast, then nodded to Han to turn it off. Her jaw was set in a hard line, and there was fire in her eyes that her crew had learned to recognize. Let them talk, she said grimly, watching the stars bend and twist outside the view screen. We'll be too busy saving lives to listen to their garbage. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that ran through every ship. Captain Yoon felt her stomach lurch as the exotic matter drives finally shut down. Their job done after 14 months of pushing the laws of physics to their breaking point. But as she looked through the view screen at their destination, her relief at arriving safely turned to horror. Aquinas Prime hung before them like a dying jewel. The planet that had once been described as a brilliant blue marble was now wrapped in a sickly green glow that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The beautiful oceans that the Cathera called home had turned gray and lifeless, as if someone had drained all the color from the world. "My God," whispered Navigation Officer Han Ju-woo. "What has that thing done to their planet?" Captain Yoon straightened her uniform and tried to push down the fear that was crawling up her spine. This was it. After 14 months of travel, they were finally here, and the situation looked even worse than they had imagined. "Communications Officer Kim Tae-hyung," she ordered, "establish contact with any surviving Cathara. Use the translation protocols Dr. Lee developed during the journey." Kim's fingers flew over his console, sending out carefully crafted signals in the Kithara's native language. For several long minutes, there was nothing but static. Then, slowly, a weak signal came back. "Captain, I'm getting a response, Kim. Reported it's faint, but someone's out there." The main screen flickered to life, and for the first time the humans saw one of the aliens they had traveled so far to help. The being that appeared before them was unlike anything in Earth's databases, yet somehow hauntingly beautiful. The Cathara looked like it had been designed by an artist who specialized in underwater scenes. Its body was graceful and flowing, with translucent fins that moved like silk in the water. Patterns of light danced across its skin. Bioluminescent displays that seemed to be how these creatures communicated emotions and thoughts. But the patterns were weak, flickering like a dying candle. And the alien's entire presence seemed exhausted beyond measure. When it spoke, its voice came through the translation software as soft and feminine, carrying a weight of sadness that needed no translation. "I am Keeper Aquilin of the Final Sanctuary," the alien said. You actually came. The Deathworlders came." For a brief moment, her light patterns brightened with what looked like surprise and hope. But then they dimmed again, as reality set back in. "We know of your species," she continued. "The galaxy tells stories about you. They say you are violent and dangerous, that you come from a world of death and destruction. They fear you." Paused, studying Captain Yoon's face through the screen. "Should we fear you as well?" Captain Yoon stepped closer to the screen, making sure Aquilin could see her clearly. She kept her voice gentle and calm, the way she might speak to a frightened child. "My name is Hae-won," she said. "We've traveled 14 months through some of the most dangerous space in the galaxy to reach you. We're here to help if you'll let us." Aquilin's patterns shifted to something the computer interpreted as confusion and disbelief. "Help?" she asked. "The void hunger has already consumed 17 of our greatest cities. Our children are dying in agony. Our elders are changing into things we don't recognize anymore. Our greatest scientists, our most advanced technology, none of it has been able to slow this thing down. What can you possibly do that our entire civilization cannot?" Dr. Lee So-young moved into view of the camera, her face showing the determination that had kept her working around the clock during their journey. "Sometimes," she said, "the solution to an impossible problem requires impossible people. We'd like to send to Atha." Aliens' patterns flickered with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. Perhaps in this situation, they were the same thing. "If you're truly willing to help us," Aquilin said slowly, "then there may be hope for my people after all. But I must warn you, many who have tried to fight the void hunger have been consumed by it. It doesn't just kill, it corrupts everything it touches." Captain Yoon nodded grimly. "Then we better get started. Time's running out, and we have a planet to save." Dr. Lee So-young felt the crushing pressure of Aquinas Prime's methane ocean pressing against her specially designed suit as she descended into the alien depths. The liquid around her wasn't water like she knew from Earth, but a thick, poisonous mixture that would kill her in seconds if her suit failed. Every breath she took came from recycled air. Every movement had to be carefully calculated to avoid tearing the delicate fabric that kept her alive. Beside her, marine biologist Dr. Shinera swam with practiced ease, her movements graceful despite the bulky equipment she carried. She had spent years studying life in Earth's deepest oceans, but nothing had prepared her for this alien underwater world. Dr. Kong Haeonsu, the team's quantum physicist, struggled more with the swimming, but his instruments were working overtime. Recording readings that shouldn't have been possible, the scene around them was like swimming through a graveyard. Where Keeper Aquilin had described beautiful coral cities and schools of colorful fish, now there was only death. Massive coral-like structures that had once been homes stretched out in all directions, but they were bleached bone-white, drained. Of all life and color, fish-like creatures floated motionless in the current, their eyes clouded over and their bodies beginning to dissolve. But the most disturbing sight was the gray infection itself, creeping across the ocean floor like spilled oil. It moved too purposefully to be natural, reaching out with tendrils that seemed to search for new life to consume. "My readings are going completely crazy," Dr. Kang reported through the communication system built into their suits. His voice was tight with excitement and fear. "This thing doesn't just exist in our normal space. It's partially in quantum space, existing in multiple dimensions at once, and it's feeding on something I've never seen before." He paused, checking his instruments again to make sure he wasn't making a mistake. "It's actually eating the barriers between different realities. Every time it consumes life, it gets stronger and more stable in our dimension." Dr. Shin was busy collecting samples of the infected water, using special containers that could hold the dangerous liquid without contaminating her suit. As she worked, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. "This isn't just some mindless parasite," she announced. "Look at how it's spreading. It's not random at all. It's targeting specific areas first, like it knows exactly what it's doing." She pointed to the pattern of destruction around them. The gray infection had attacked the Kithris communication centers first, then their power sources, then their food production areas. It was systematically destroying their civilization piece by piece. "It's intelligent," she concluded, "and it's been planning this attack." Above them, Keeper Aquilin swam through the ruins of what had once been her home city. Her bioluminescent patterns were dim with grief as she guided the human scientists through the devastation. Even through the translation software, her pain was obvious. 6 months ago, this was a thriving metropolis, she explained, her voice hollow with loss. "Millions of my people lived here, worked here, raised their children here. Then we detected a small anomaly in our deepest ocean trenches. Just a tiny patch of something that didn't belong." She paused at what had once been a school. Now, nothing but empty ruins. "We sent our best scientists to study it. We thought it might be some kind of natural phenomenon, maybe even something we could learn from. By the time we realized what it really was, it had already spread too far to stop." Dr. Lee felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold methane around her. "Keeper Aquilin, how many worlds has this thing destroyed?" Aquilin's patterns flickered with the weight of terrible knowledge. "Based on our astronomical records and reports from other species, at least 43 worlds that we know of, it appears. In a system, consumes all life, then disappears into quantum space to search for its next target." "So you sent out the distress call not just to save yourselves," Dr. Lee realized, "but to warn the galaxy. We hoped that someone, somewhere, would be smart enough or brave enough to find a way to stop it before it moved on to the next world," Aquilin confirmed. "We knew we were probably going to die, but maybe our sacrifice could save others." Kong's instrument suddenly started beeping frantically. "The quantum readings are spiking," he reported, his voice tight with alarm. "It's getting stronger by the minute. Every life it consumes is making it more powerful, more stable in our reality." He looked at his data with growing horror. "At this rate, soon it won't need to hide in quantum space at all. It'll be able to exist fully in normal space, and then..." He trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. "Then it'll be unstoppable," Dr. Lee finished for him. She checked her own bio readings and felt her heart skip a beat. The numbers were fluctuating in ways that shouldn't be possible, as if something was interfering with her body's natural processes. "We better work fast," she muttered, trying to keep the fear out of her voice, "'cause I think this thing has noticed us, and it doesn't like visitors." Around them, the gray infection seemed to pulse with new interest, and tendrils of corruption began reaching toward the small group of humans who dared to enter its domain. The makeshift laboratory aboard the UCS Determination buzzed with nervous energy as Earth's brightest minds gathered around. Holographic displays that showed something no human had ever seen before. Dr. Lee So-young stood at the center of it all, her face drawn with exhaustion but her eyes burning with determination. Around her, scientists and military officers crowded together, studying the alien parasite that had stumped an entire galaxy. The holographic images were both fascinating and terrifying. On one side floated a three-dimensional model of the void hunger, its quantum structure shifting and pulsing like a living nightmare. On the other side were displays of Earth's most extreme life forms, creatures that thrived in conditions that would instantly kill most living things. "Everything we've tried so far has been useless," Dr. Lee began, her voice carrying the frustration of weeks of failed experiments. "Energy weapons, explosives, even theoretical nuclear devices pass right through this thing like it doesn't exist. That's because half the time, it doesn't exist in our reality." She moved to the containment unit sitting on the lab table, which held what looked like ordinary pond scum. But the readings coming from the container told a very different story. "There's something this parasite wasn't expecting when it came to our galaxy," she continued, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Meet some friends from home." Captain Yoon leaned forward, squinting at the unremarkable-looking bacteria. "That's your secret weapon? It looks like something I'd clean out of my fish tank." "This is Pyrococcus furiosus," Dr. Lee explained, her excitement growing. "It's a hyperthermophile, which means it loves extreme heat. These little guys live around underwater volcanic vents on Earth, in temperatures hot enough to boil lead. The pressure down there would crush a submarine. The water is full of toxic chemicals. And there's no light at all." She gestured to the readings on her screen. "Most life forms would die instantly in those conditions. But these bacteria don't just survive, they thrive. They've evolved to eat things that would poison other organisms and turn conditions that should be deadly into their perfect home." Dr. Kong Hyensu stepped forward, his quantum physics equipment humming quietly beside him. "We've spent the last week modifying these bacteria in ways that should be impossible. Using quantum manipulation techniques, we've taught them to exist partially in quantum space, just like the parasite." Captain Yoon shook her head in confusion. "I still don't understand how bacteria from Earth can fight something that exists in multiple dimensions." "The parasite feeds on life energy," Dr. King explained. "It's like a vampire that drinks the essence of living things. But these modified bacteria produce energy in completely different ways than anything, though, without warning." Reality twisted around Captain Yoon, and suddenly she was watching Earth burn. The blue skies turned black, the oceans boiled away, and everyone she had ever loved screamed as they died. She saw her hometown reduced to ash, her family reaching out for help that would never come. "It's not real," she muttered through gritted teeth, forcing herself to keep swimming. "It's just trying to break us." Around her, the other team members were fighting their own psychological battles. The parasite had reached into their minds and pulled out their worst fears, their deepest regrets, their most painful memories. It showed them everything they were afraid of losing, everything they had failed to protect, everything that kept them awake at night. Marine Joe pushed through what looked like a wall of screaming faces, each one twisted in agony. "Just like the deep ocean back home," he muttered, his voice steady despite the horror surrounding them. Except the anglerfish were prettier. His joke cut through the fear like a knife, reminding everyone that they were still human, still together, still fighting. They had all grown up on Earth, a world that had thrown everything from tsunamis to volcanic eruptions at them. A few psychological tricks from an alien parasite weren't going to stop them now. Deploying first payload, Dr. Lee announced, her voice tight with concentration as she released a cloud of modified bacteria into the heart of the infection. The reaction was immediate and violent. The gray mass around them recoiled, like it had been hit with acid, its quantum structure flickering and becoming unstable. For a moment, the nightmarish visions faded, and the water cleared enough for them to see where they were going. Engineer. Moon monitored her instruments while swimming, watching the readings that told them whether their plan was working. The bacteria are having an effect, she reported. But this thing is adapting faster than we expected. It's learning to resist them. She looked at the data streaming across her screen, and her expression grew grim. We need to reach the core of this thing and deploy everything we have before. It figures out how to neutralize our weapons. The deeper they descended, the more desperate the parasite became. It threw everything it had at the small group of humans who dared to invade its domain. Gravity fields pressed down on them, trying to crush their suits like tin cans. Bursts of radiation tried to cook them alive from the inside out. Time itself seemed to flow wrong, aging their equipment decades in just seconds. But humans had evolved. On a planet that had been trying to kill them since the day they first stood upright, they had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, plagues and predators, storms that could level cities and earthquakes that could split continents. A hostile alien parasite was just another Tuesday. Their engineer Rue pointed through the infected. Water to something that made everyone's blood run cold, at the bottom of the trench. Pulsing with malevolent energy was a massive organic structure that looked like a heart made of pure darkness. It was the size of a city block, covered in writhing tentacles that reached out into quantum space. This was the quantum anchor, the thing that allowed the parasite to exist in multiple dimensions at once. That's our target, Captain Yoon said. Studying the alien horror below them, destroy that. And we cut this thing off from its power source. Marine Lim pointed to the water around them, which was becoming thick and solid, trying to trap them in place like insects in amber. It knows we're coming, she observed, and it's not happy about it. Captain Yoon checked her suit's power levels, and weapon systems then looked at her team of volunteers who had followed her into hell without hesitation. She smiled grimly, the expression of someone who had never backed down from a fight in her life. Then let's not keep it waiting, she said, and led her team toward the heart of darkness. The final battle for Aquinas Prime began like a nightmare coming to life. Captain Yoon and her team pushed forward through defenses that seemed to bend the laws of reality itself. The parasite had stopped playing games now, throwing everything it had at the humans who dared to threaten its existence. Quantum barriers rose up around them like walls of pure energy, crackling with power that could tear apart their suits in an instant. But worse than that, the barriers were turning their own weapons against them. Every shot they fired, every explosive they threw, came bouncing back twice as strong. This thing is learning from everything we do, Engineer Rue shouted over the chaos, his voice barely audible through the communication system as reality warped around them. Above them, swimming through the infected waters with desperate courage, Keeper Aquilin had joined the fight despite everyone's protests. The Cathara leader had insisted on coming down to the deepest part of her world's ocean, saying that her people deserved to have someone witness their final stand. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered like a lighthouse in the darkness, providing the only source of natural light in the hellish landscape around them. The patterns were speaking in her people's ancient language, calling out prayers and war cries that had not been heard for generations. The bacteria are having an effect, Dr. Lee reported, as she released another wave of modified organisms into the heart of the infection. But it's not fast enough. This thing is adapting to everything we throw at it. She watched in frustration as the gray mass of the parasite seemed to shiver and change, learning to break down the earth bacteria before they could do their work. It's actually metabolizing them now, turning our weapons into food. The situation was desperate, and everyone knew it. They had come so far, risked so much, only to watch their best plan fall apart in front of their eyes. That's when Keeper Aquilin's patterns suddenly exploded with light, flashing so brightly that even through the infected water, everyone could see her clearly. "Wait," she said, her translated voice filled with sudden hope. "Our neural networks, the way we think and communicate, it's all quantum-based. We exist partially in the same space as this parasite." She turned to Dr. Lee, her patterns shifting to show excitement and determination. "If I link directly with Your organisms? I can guide them past the parasite's defenses. I can show them exactly where to strike. Captain Yoon felt her blood run cold. Aquilin, that level of quantum connection could kill you. Your nervous system wasn't designed to interface with alien biology. The Cathara Keeper's patterns shifted to something that the translation software interpreted as sad acceptance. Captain, my people are already dying. Our children, our elders, our entire civilization is being consumed by this monster. At least this way our death has meaning. At least this way we fight back. Without waiting for permission, Aquilin extended bioelectric tendrils from her body toward Dr. Lee's bacterial containment unit. The moment the alien biology touched the modified Earth organisms, something incredible happened. The bacteria and the Cathara neural tissue began to merge in ways that should have been impossible. The hybrid creation that formed pulsed with new purpose. Guided by the intelligence of an entire alien species, empowered by the stubborn determination that had carried humans across 14 months of space to be here, Engineer Rue watched his instruments go completely insane as readings spiked beyond anything he had ever seen. The quantum field is destabilizing, he reported, his voice filled with amazement. Whatever you two are doing, it's actually working. But the parasite wasn't going to die quietly, sensing that its existence was truly threatened for the first time. It began pulling energy from other dimensions, fracturing reality around them as it fought back with increasing desperation. The water turned solid, then liquid, then into something. That wasn't either. Gravity shifted in impossible directions. Time flowed backward and forward at random intervals. The team's suits, designed to handle the most extreme conditions Earth could imagine, began failing under the assault. "Hull breach in my left arm," Marine Lim reported calmly, even as her suit began leaking the precious air that kept her alive. "Power. Systems failing," Engineer Moon added. Watching her life support readings drop toward zero, Marine Joe checked his chronometer and felt his stomach drop. "Core breach in 30 seconds, he announced. "Whatever we're going to do, this is our only shot." Captain Yoon looked at her team, these incredible humans who had followed her into the abyss without hesitation. And then at Keeper Aquilin, whose people had shown them trust beyond anything they deserved. "Together," she said simply, "human and Cathara, two species separated by millions of years of evolution and billions of miles of space, released their combined creation into the heart of the parasite." The hybrid organisms spread through the quantum structure like wildfire, guided by alien intelligence and fueled by human courage. For the first time since this nightmare began, the void hunger began to die. 6 months had passed since the battle. In the deepest trenches of Aquana's prime, and Captain Yoon could hardly believe the transformation she was witnessing. Standing on the observation deck of the UCS Determination, she watched through the reinforced windows as the alien world slowly healed itself below. The oceans that had been gray and lifeless were now returning to their original brilliant blue color. Schools of native fish swam freely through the water, their numbers growing stronger each day. The coral cities of the Cathara were rebuilding themselves, glowing with bioluminescent patterns that created an underwater light show visible, even from orbit. But the most amazing thing wasn't just that they had saved one world. The hybrid organisms created from the merger of Earth bacteria and Cathara biology had done something incredible. They had created a permanent immunity to the void hunger that could be shared with other species, other worlds that might face the same threat in the future. The communication console chimed, and Admiral Kim Soo-jin's face appeared on the screen, broadcasting from Earth Command Headquarters. She looked tired but proud, the expression of someone who had watched the impossible become reality. "Captain, I have some interesting news from the diplomatic front," she began. "The Galactic Council has officially requested a meeting with Earth's representatives. Apparently, word has gotten out about what happened here." She paused, consulting a report on her desk. "We've received confirmed reports that 17 other species have been attacked by parasites similar to the void hunger, and guess who they're all asking for help from now?" Commander Park Woobin, who had been quietly reviewing supply reports in the corner, looked up with a grin. "What about those alien betting pools that were so sure we'd fail? Are they still taking odds on human missions?" "Admiral," Kim actually laughed at that. "It's funny you should ask. According to our intelligence reports, The major gambling organizations have stopped accepting bets on human operations entirely. Apparently, it's bad for business when the Deathworlders keep defying expectations and actually winning. The door to the observation lounge slid open, and Keeper Aquilin swam into view through the ship's specially designed aquatic sections. The changes in her were remarkable. Once her bioluminescent patterns had been dim and flickering with despair. Now they blazed with health and hope. The symbiotic merger with the Earth organisms had changed not just her, but all the surviving. Cathera, they were stronger now, more resilient, capable of things their species had never been able to do before. In a strange way, the fight to save their world had made them better than they had been before the crisis began. Captain Yoon, Aquilin said, her translated voice warm with gratitude. My people have been discussing what we learned from working with your species. The galaxy is slowly beginning to understand what we now know to be true. Her patterns shifted to show deep thoughtfulness. For too long we measured civilization by how advanced a species' technology was, or how much power they could wield. But true civilization isn't about what you can build or destroy. It's about your willingness to help those who cannot help themselves. Dr. Lee So-young entered the observation lounge at that moment, carrying a data tablet that seemed to be overflowing with information. She looked exhausted but excited, expression of a scientist who had just discovered that her life's work was more important than she had ever imagined. Speaking of helping others, she said, setting the tablet down on the table where everyone could see it, we've been flooded with requests for assistance. 17 different worlds have officially asked for our help, and more messages are arriving every day. She scrolled through the files, showing images of different alien species and their home worlds. These are civilizations that sent out distress calls just like the Cathara did. And just like the Cathara, they were ignored by the galaxy's major powers. But now that word has spread about what we accomplished here, they're all turning to us. Captain Yoon studied the requests, seeing the faces of aliens who looked nothing like humans but whose desperation was universal. How many of them are facing parasites like the void hunger? About half, Dr. Lee replied. The others are dealing with different problems, natural disasters, resource depletion, civil wars, plague outbreaks, the kind of problems that require someone willing to risk everything. To help complete strangers? Captain Yu nodded, then turned back to the window to look down at Aquanus Prime. In the restored oceans below, she could see Cathara children playing games that their species had thought they would never see again. Families that had been separated by the infection were reunited. Cities that had been destroyed were being rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful than before. And I guess we better get to work, she said simply. The universe has always been a dangerous place, full of threats, that most species prefer to ignore or run away from. But apparently, it takes Deathworlders to make it safe. Behind them, the small human fleet was already beginning preparations for their next mission. Ships were being refueled, supplies were being loaded, and volunteers were signing up faster than they could be processed. They were carrying something that the galaxy had nearly forgotten existed: hope. The galaxy had spent years learning to fear humanity's capacity for violence, their reputation as dangerous beings from a deadly world. But now they were discovering something far more dangerous than human aggression, something that would change the balance of power throughout the stars. They were discovering humanity's capacity for compassion. And the universe would never be the same. He paused, looking around the room at faces that already knew what he was going to say. The survival rate for that mission is essentially 0, he finished quietly. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the distant sound of the ship's engines. Everyone understood what that meant. This wasn't just a dangerous mission, it was a suicide mission. Dr. Lee straightened her shoulders and looked around the room at her colleagues and friends. Then I guess it's a good thing I've already made peace with that, she said simply. I'm volunteering. Captain Yoon stepped forward immediately, her expression fierce. Not alone, she said firmly. We're going to do something completely insane. We're going to do it together. Around the room, other voices began volunteering, each person ready to risk everything for a species they had never met before this mission. It was, Dr. Lee realized, the most human thing any of them could do.